Hi everyone, good day. Today we will discuss cross product. Yung last meeting, nag-discuss na tayo ng dot product or yung scalar product. So ngayon naman, ang di-discuss natin is about cross product. Ano ba yung cross product? Para natin i-evaluate ang cross product. And then we'll try to solve a few examples to illustrate yung paggamit ng mga cross or paggamit ng cross product. So, ayan. So what is a vector product or the cross product? The vector product of two vectors A and B, denoted as A cross B, is defined as the vector whose magnitude is the absolute value of the product of the magnitudes of the two vectors and the sign of the smaller angle between the two vectors, while the direction of the vector is perpendicular to the plane in which the two vectors lie. So medyo mahaba yung definition niya, but mathematically, ito yung ibig sabihin ng vector product or yung ating cross product. So we have uh, this notation cross, so A cross B is equivalent to a particular vector. So ang sagot pala natin sa isang vector product is a vector, while sa scalar product or yung dot product, ang sagot natin doon is a scalar value. So dito sa vector product, ang sagot natin is a vector quantity. So meron yan lagi tayong um, notation ng unit vector. So ang ginagamit natin dito yung n. So n hat, kasi ang sabi sa direction is perpendicular to the plane in which the two vectors lie. So sabi dyan, it is multiplied to the absolute value nung product ng kanilang magnitudes, that's A and B, and the sign of the smaller angle between the two vectors. So dun sa dot product, kung maaalala ninyo, ang ginagamit naman natin doon ay yung cosine nung angle, smaller angle between the two vectors. So dito naman sa vector product, sign naman ang ginagamit natin. So ano ba yung mga nakikita nating annotations dyan? First, meron tayong cross, kaya siya tinawag na cross product kasi meron ang notation or symbol na ginagamit natin ay yung cross. Next, yung ating n hat, it denotes na yung ating direction is perpendicular or normal. Normal unit vector yung ating n hat dyan. Okay, kaya ginamit na n. And then, sinabi sa definition, the product of the magnitudes ng dalawang vector, and nandyan pa rin, of course, yung ating sign of the smaller angle. So, palagi nyo lang tatandaan itong formula na ito to define ano ba yung vector product or the cross product ng dalawang vectors A and B. Okay? So in this slide, we'll discuss yung mga properties ng vector product. So, yan. I-project lang natin dyan yung diniscuss natin kaninang definition. Okay, ano ba yung mga properties ng vector product or cross product? First, vector product is not commutative. Ano ibig sabihin niyan? So, meron siyang sinusundan na specific arrangement. So, sabi dito, the cross product of A and B is equal to the negative B cross A. Ibig sabihin, pag binaliktad mo yung arrangement ng vectors mo sa isang cross product, nababago yung direction. So therefore, the vector product is not commutative. Mamaya, mas maintindihan yung ibig sabihin kung bakit nagkakaroon siya ng negative. So it means kasi parang nababaliktad yung direction ng ating cross product. Okay? So next property is that the vector product is always perpendicular to the plane of the two vectors. It is described by the right-hand rule. Ibig sabihin, meron tayong right hand, yung ating index finger that denotes yung A na nauuna dun sa ating notation, A cross B. Yung ating namang middle finger or yung ating palm Yun yung nasa second, yung B. Okay? And kung saan tuturo yung direction ng ating thumb, doon yung direction ng ating cross product. So, kung babalik rin naman natin yung ating notation, so let's say B cross A. So, yung B, yung ating nasa index finger, and yung A nasa kabila. So, ang resulting direction ng ating cross product is the opposite. Kaya, masasabi rin natin na yung vector product is not commutative. Okay? And the vector product is always perpendicular to the planes of the two vectors na ating kinukuha ng vector product. Okay? Next, of course, kung yung vector product natin is always perpendicular to the plane of the two vectors, the vector product of two parallel vectors is always zero. Isa yan sa mga properties ng vector products na magagamit natin later on. Next, the vector product is of course not associative. And although the vector product is distributive. Ano ibig sabihin niya? So, we can distribute a cross product. So, ito yung isang example. A vector A cross ng sum ng dalawang vector is also equal to cross product, the sum of the cross product of the two vectors. So, yan yung ating example of properties ng proper vector product. Lastly, the magnitude of the vector product represents the area bounded by the parallelogram formed by the two vectors and the two lines parallel to the vectors. Medyo mahaba, no? Pero ganito yan. So, ibig sabihin, kung gagawa pala tayo ng parallelogram using the two vectors na kinukuha na natin ng vector product, makaka-form tayo ng parallelogram. So, yung magnitude ng ating vector product represents the area ng parallelogram na yan. So, yan ang ibig sabihin nitong sixth property ng vector product. So, magagamit natin yan later on sa applications ng vector product. Okay? So, pakitandaan natin yung anim na properties ng vector products. Number 1, not commutative. 2, the vector product is always perpendicular to the plane of the two vectors. The vector product of two parallel vectors is always 0. Vector product is not associative, although it is distributive. And the magnitude of the vector product represents the area bounded by the parallelogram formed by the two vectors and two lines parallel to the vectors. Okay, let's go. Next, let us evaluate a vector product ng dalawang vectors, A and B, using their components. So, ito naman, gagamit tayo ng X, Y, and Z to evaluate ano ba yung formula or relationship between the cross product and the components of each of the vectors. Okay, so as defined, we have the cross product of A and B is equivalent to n hat times the absolute value of magnitude ng A times the magnitude of B times the sine of the smaller angle between these two vectors. So we know na ganito yung magiging itsura niya. Di ba? So, yung ating A, ito yung kanyang mga components. And yung B, ito naman din yung kanyang mga components, right? And we still have the cross product in between. So, we know na yung ating, tama, no? Yung ating vector product is distributive. So, we are going to distribute each of these items para makuha natin yung ating dot product. Okay? So, yan. The vector product is distributive. So, gagawin natin tong property na to evaluate this vector product. So, first, we have x hat cross x hat times a sub x, b sub x, plus x hat cross y hat, a sub x, b sub y. So, dito na tayo sa second term. Then, third term naman, Ayan. X hat cross Z hat times A sub X B sub Z. So, if uulitin natin to dun sa tatlong terms ng Y and Z, ito yung kanyang lalabas. Okay? Then, Y and Z. Then, sa third term naman, Z and X. Then, Z and Y. And then, Z and Z. So, yan sila, no? So, paano na yung susunod? Another property na magagamit natin to evaluate itong particular na expansion na to is that the vector product of two parallel vectors is always zero. So, mapapansin natin yung mga parallel vectors like itong x cross x, y cross y, then z cross z. These are parallel vectors. So, therefore, magiging zero na yun. Mawawala yan sa ating equation. Okay? And another property na gagamitin natin is that the vector product is always perpendicular to the plane of the two vectors. So, ano ibig sabihin yan? Ang ibig sabihin yan, pag perpendicular, yung direction ng ating cross product is nando sa natitirang axis. Like, for example, itong x hat cross y hat, yung vector product natin is pointing towards the z-axis. So, gagamitin natin itong mga identity na to, or yung itong property na to, to solve and simplify itong ating evaluation. So, for example, first, itong x hat, y hat na cross product ng x hat and y. So, ano yung lumalabas dito? So, that's going to be in the z direction, right? So, ayan. Mawawala na yan. And then, papalitan ko lang siya ng positive z times yung ating mga coefficients. Hindi yan magbabago. Then next, meron tayong z x hat cross z hat. So we have here the negative y hat. So papalitan lang natin ng negative y hat yan. Yan. Okay. Next, the y hat cross x hat. The y hat cross x hat is the negative z. So ganun din, papalitan lang din natin yan. And then ito naman, the y hat cross z hat. Yan. Ito natin yan. And then, z hat cross x hat. Yan. This is the positive y hat. So, papalitan lang din natin yan. Then, ano pa? Lastly, we have the z hat cross y hat. So, negative x hat pala yung kapalit niya. Yan. So, now we have this further simplified evaluation of the vector product. So, pwede pa siyang ma-simplify kung tutuusin. Okay? So, pagsasamahin natin yung mga same axis. So, yung x hat, pagsamahin natin. So, anong lalabas dyan? So, yung dalawa na yun, pagdikitin lang natin. Then, sa y naman, itong negative y tsaka y. Yan. And then, sa z, yan. In-arrange lang natin siya accordingly so that mas madali nating ma-evaluate. Okay? So now, ano na yung ating final answer? The cross product of vectors A and B is equal to x hat times the difference between these terms ng A sub y, B sub z, minus A sub z, B sub y. Okay? So, mapapansin natin, x yung nasa vector side or direction, pero yung ating mga magnitude is influenced by yung ating mga coefficients or magnitudes sa different components. So, kung x yung ating nasa direction, sa magnitude naman yung y and z. So, same din sa y, ganun din, y hat times, or the quantity, a sub z, b sub x, minus a sub x times b sub z. Then, finally, sa z hat times a sub x, b sub y, minus a sub y, b sub x. So, yun yung ating evaluation ng cross product if we are going to use the x, y, and z components ng ating mga vectors. Okay. Medyo mahaba siya, di ba? So we can rewrite this formula, okay, into a simpler one na mas madali natin matatandaan. So, pwede natin siyang isulat or i-rewrite into a matrix form, or actually dito is a determinant ng 3 by 3 matrix. So, yung nasa first row, yun yung ating mga unit vectors. Okay? X hat, Y hat, and then Z hat. And then sa second row naman, those are yung ating mga magnitudes ng first vector dito sa notation natin. Okay? Then dito naman sa third row is yung mga coefficients or yung magnitudes ng kada component nung second vector. So always pakitandaan yung placement ng ating mga symbols and yung numbers para mas madali natin ma-solve. Okay? Kung magkakabaliktad yan, ililipat lang din natin yung B sa second row kung baliktad. Okay? So, let's try to solve this problem for us to appreciate or illustrate yung gamit ng vector product. So, in this example, we are tasked to find a vector normal to a plane that contains the points 0, 1, 0, 0.1, 0, 1, and 0.001. And afterwards, we will try to find the normal unit vector. So, sa una pala, pinapahanap sa atin yung vector that is perpendicular doon sa plane na kung saan nandyan yung tatlong points. And then, finally, we are going to find yung unit vector naman ng vector na yan. Okay, so, yung B medyo madali na siyang kunin dahil aware na tayo kung paano kukunin yung unity vector. Pero yung A medyo tricky siya. So, we will use yung na-discuss natin kanina about sa vector, mga properties ng vectors, and yung formula. Okay? So, to find the vector normal to the plane that contains these points, two vectors in the plane can be defined using any two pairs of points. So let's say we are going to use point 1 and point 2. We can now define a vector from point 1 to point 2 as vector A. So ito yan. From point 1 to point 2, yun yung ating vector A. Yan. So sa X component, ililess lang natin yung ating mga points, and then sa Y, ganun din sa Z. So nakapag-solve na tayo ng ganito in our previous videos. So medyo madali na yan sa inyo. Pag given ng points, usually minimize talaga natin yan. Okay? Then, so substitute lang natin yung mga points natin. Sa X component, we have 1 minus 0. Sa Y naman, we have 0 minus 1. Then sa Z, we have 1 minus 0. So therefore, yung ating vector A will be represented by x hat 1 minus y hat 1 plus z hat 1. Okay? Yan. Similarly, yung ating second vector, kailangan piliin naman natin yung nasa point 1 papunta dun sa point 3. Okay? So same approach, we are going to assign B as our vector. So B is equal to x hat, x sub 3 minus x sub 1, sa y hat, ganun din, then sa z hat. So substitute natin mga values. We now have B is equal to x hat, 0 minus 0. Sa y naman, we have y hat times 0 minus 1. Then sa z hat, we have 1 minus 0. Therefore, ang ating vector B would be, wala tayong x component, meron tayong y, so negative y, 1, y hat 1, plus z hat 1. So, meron na tayong dalawang vectors that would be in the plane na dadaan doon sa points na this give. giniven sa atin ng problem. So, the cross product is the vector normal to A and B. Sabi naman kanina sa definition, yung ating cross product is a vector that is perpendicular doon sa ating dalawang vectors. Okay? So, paano natin gawin yan? Formula. Okay? By using the right hand rule, yung direction ng ating cross product will be described or will be in the direction predicted by the right hand rule. So yung ating formula would be A cross B is equal to the determinant ng components na ito. Okay? So that will be written by A cross B is equal to x hat, y hat, z hat. Then sulat natin yung mga coefficients like positive 1 dito, negative 1 sa gitna, and then 1 sa z. Same with sa B. Tatandaan, pag wala yung x, 0 lang yan. Then sa y, we have negative 1. Sa z, that we have 1. Sagutan na natin yung ating para ba natin ginagawa yan. So, para lang maalala ninyo, paano natin ginagawa yung pagkuha ng determinants, ito. So, first, yung ating pag-evaluate ng diagonal from the first row and first column. So, x times negative 1 times 1. So, that will be negative x hat 1. Next, yung y naman. So, y hat times 1 times 0, that would be 0 yan. Sa z naman, z hat times 1 times negative 1, so that we have negative z hat 1. So, after nyan, matapos yung ating left to right, na diagonal, minus na tayo. Minus, and then, baliktad the direction, taas naman. So, first we have x hat times 1 times negative 1. So, that's negative x hat 1. Sa y naman, we have y hat times 1 times 1. So, that's positive y hat 1. So, z is 0 times negative 1 times z hat. So, therefore, we have negative 0 hat. So, tatandaan, meron tayong negative dyan, no? So, i-evaluate natin yan later on. Simplifying these terms, sa x side, we have 0, right? Kasi negative 1 to, and dito naman magiging positive 1. Therefore, 0 yung x component. Sa y naman, we have 0, then negative 1 to, dahil negative times positive is negative. So, negative y hat 1. Sa z naman, we have negative or minus z hat 1 dahil ito ay 0. So, yan na yung ating cross product, which is the vector normal to the plane that contains the points 1, 2, and 3 in this problem. So, yan na yung ating vector. Okay. For the second problem, we are going to find the normal unit vector. So we have actually two ways in solving this. The first being is to use the definition of the unit or the definition of the vector product. So ito na yun, pinaproject ko lang. Okay? Paano natin makukuha yan? Kailangan natin yung angle, the smaller angle between these two vectors para magamit natin yung formula na to. Remember, we already have the A cross B kanina sa letter A na problem. Ang gusto natin makuha is itong n hat. Right? Kasi yan ang magsasabi ng ating unit normal unit vector. So, pwede rin naman nating makuha na yung ating magnitudes, di ba? Dahil na-describe na natin yung A and B. Ang kulang na lang is yung ating angle. Right? So, paano natin kukunin yung ating angle in between? Remember, pwede natin yan makuha using the formula for the scalar product. Okay? So, subukan natin. We know that the normal unit vector is equal to the cross product between the two vectors divided by the absolute value of the product of the magnitude ng dalawang vectors na yun times the sign of the smaller angle between them. Okay? We already have the cross product given by the negative y hat 1 minus z hat 1. Then we already have the vectors a, x hat 1 minus y hat 1 plus z hat 1. So, kung meron na tayong vector, makukuha natin yung kanyang magnitude, and that would be equal to the square root of 3. Then yung b naman, b is equal to negative y hat 1 plus z hat 1. Therefore, yung ating magnitude ng b would be equal to like square root of 2. So, unti-unti na natin nasasagutan ito. Para makuha natin yung angle, we will use the formula described or discussed in the previous videos kung paano kunin yan. And that would be the inverse cosine or the arc cosine of the scalar product a dot b over the magnitude ng over the product of the magnitudes of the two vectors. So since given naman yan, pwede nating evaluate. It is the angle now becomes yung cross product natin, that would be 1 times 0 plus negative 1 times negative 1 plus 1 times 1 all over the square root of 3 times the square root of 2. Therefore, yung ating angle between these two vectors is equal to 35 degrees and 16 seconds. So, makukuha na pala natin yung ating normal unit vector. And that would be, pag i-substitute natin itong mga values ng a cross b, and yung ating magnitudes, and yung ating angle, malalaman natin na yung ating normal unit vector is equal to negative y hat 0.7071 minus z hat 0.7071. And sabi ko nga kanina, we have two ways in finding this normal unit vector. Meron tayong mas simple. Okay? This is another way in getting the normal unit vector. Since nakuha naman na natin yung ating cross product, okay? Yung cross product, kukunin lang natin yung unit vector ng cross product. And yung ating normal unit vector ng cross product na yan is equal to the cross product divided by the magnitude ng cross product na yan. And so, mas madali dahil dalawa lang yung ating coefficients or components. Ito na yung ating result. So, it is now equal to negative y hat 1 minus z hat 1 all over the square root of 2. And that will yield to the same result as the first solution. So, yan. Yan yung ating solution dun sa or application ng pagkuha ng vector product sa vector analysis. Another application in which we can use the vector product is when we want to find the area of a triangle formed by 3 points. So, usually kasi ang pagkuha ng area ng triangle is 1/2 times the base times the height. So in this particular problem, we are only given with 3 points in space. So medyo mahirap siya. And vector product allows us to calculate for the area of this triangle formed by 3 points in space using the vector product formula. So, paano natin gagawin yan? We have the property number 6 na diniscuss natin kanina, right? Allow me to repeat. The magnitude of the vector product represents the area bounded by the parallelogram formed by the two vectors and two lines parallel to the vectors. In short, i-extend natin yung ating triangle and gagawin natin parallelogram. And from there, kukunin natin yung cross product at hahatiin natin yan sa dalawa para maging triangle ulit. So, paano yan? So, ito yung isang example. Ang sabi kasi natin, yung magnitude, well, for this question kasi, ang importante lang naman sa pagkuha ng area is yung magnitude. So, wala tayong pakialam kung yung direction is going up or going on the opposite direction. So, Ang kailangan lang natin makuha is yung magnitude ng ating cross product. And sabi nga, yung magnitude is the area of the parallelogram formed by the two vectors and two lines parallel to these vectors. So the calculation now becomes, for the area of the triangle ABC, we will calculate the magnitude of the cross product ng dalawang vectors na yan and hahatiin lang natin sa dalawa. Yun na yung area ng ating triangle, right? So, yeah. Therefore, yung ating area ng triangle ABC, we denote it with S to signify surface area ng ating triangle ABC. It is equal to the magnitude ng ating cross product divided by 2. So, paano natin yan gagawin? Yan. Kailangan daw natin yung ating cross product. Therefore, gagamitin natin yung, para makakuha tayo ng cross product, kailangan muna natin ng vectors. So, represent muna natin yung ating mga points into vectors. Same dun sa ginawa natin kanina sa solve problem. Okay? So, sa A, it is the vector from point 1 going to point 2. It is represented by negative y hat 1 plus z hat 1. Sa B naman, it is the vector from point 1 to point 3, and it is represented by x hat 2 plus y hat 2 plus z hat 2. We now have these two vectors in which pwede natin makuha yung ating vector product, right? So, yung ating vector product is evaluated with the determinant of the 3 by 3 matrix as shown. So, hindi ko napapakita kung paano yung step by step, no? So, substitute natin yung mga value. Substitute 0 sa A, 0, negative 1, 1. Sa B naman, 2, 2, 2. So, that would be negative x times negative 1 times 2 plus y hat times 1 times 2 plus z hat times 0 times 2 minus z hat times 2 times 1 plus x hat times 2 times 1 plus y hat times 2 times 0. So, ayan. Ang gagawin natin dyan na susunod is i-simplify natin para makakuha tayo ng vector cross product na vector. It would be equal to, sa x component kasi, we have negative 2 minus 2. Therefore, magiging negative 4. Sa y naman, we have positive 2 minus 0. Therefore, positive 2 na to. Sa z, we have 0 minus negative 2. That would be positive 2. So, yung ating cross product pala is, ito yung kanyang vector equation. Okay? Hindi pa dyan natatapos kasi kailangan natin kunin yung kanyang magnitude. And the magnitude is equal to the square root of the sum ng squares ng kanyang mga magnitudes. Okay? So, and the magnitude of the cross product is equal to square root of 24. Okay? So, dahil meron na tayong cross product, pwede na natin makuha yung surface area ng ating triangle. And that would be equal to the square root of 24 over 2 square units. Okay? So, that's it. So, we have defined the vector product. We have differentiate or compared the vector product to the scalar product na diniscuss natin on the previous video. We showed the properties ng vector products and even evaluated kung paano kinukuha yun. Paano na tayo nakaderive doon sa ating formula ng vector products using the components x, y, and z components ng ating mga vectors. And we also solved a couple of examples on how to use vector products uh, in vector analysis. So that's it. Uh, Tune in for the next few videos involving um, paggamit naman ng mga triple products. Triple vector products and triple scalar products. Yeah. Then we'll head into the system coordinates. Okay? So with that, maraming salamat and have a nice day.